Hello, my name is Reiko Osoroshi. On this channel, I narrate Japanese ghost stories. Today, I will narrate ghost stories, tale. Tale. This is a story my great-grandfather is said to have experienced. It's a tale from the Taisho era, a long time ago. My great-grandfather's name was Masao. Masao had a hobby of hunting and would often go hunting in the mountains whenever he had free time, catching wild boars, rabbits, pheasants, and other animals. He was reputed to be a skilled marksman with his hunting rifle and was somewhat of a local celebrity among his hunting companions. The mountains, as a place, can be quite mysterious, don't you think? My grandpa also heard various strange stories from Masao. Today, I'd like to share the scariest story from among those. On that day, the weather was clear and sunny in May. Masao, carrying his hunting rifle, was climbing his usual mountain. His beloved dog, Takaru, an Akita breed, was accompanying him. With his extensive experience in mountain hunting, Masao often went hunting alone. On that mountain, he had built a small cabin where he would cook his game and enjoy a drink, making it his favorite pastime. On this day, he started hunting early in the morning, but he didn't manage to catch anything at all. By now, it was getting late in the afternoon, and the mountain was growing dim. Thinking, let's try for about one more hour, Masao decided to continue hunting. About 30 minutes later, something happened. Just as Masao was starting to give up on catching anything that day, a splendid wild boar appeared right in front of him, accompanied by its young ones. Masao took aim and was about to fire, but startled by the sudden appearance of a human, the wild boar quickly turned around and ran up the mountain path. Masao fired a shot, but it seemed to miss. His faithful dog, Takaru, immediately chased after the wild boar. Masao followed, running up the steep mountain path. After pursuing them for about 15 minutes, Masao lost sight of the wild boar family. Separated from Takaru and feeling lost, Masao heard Takaru barking in the distance. Guided by that barking, he sprinted along the mountain path for about another 10 minutes. There, he found Takaru. The dog was barking fiercely into dense undergrowth. In that direction, there were towering pine trees on both sides, resembling the entrance to something. Masao was well aware of what that place was. It was a silent taboo shared among his hunting companions and all the people who lived around there, the place you must never enter. Masao had heard this from his parents many times since he was a child. That's where the mountain god resides. If you recklessly enter, you'll get devoured, they used to say. However, for some reason, if you ventured deeper into that forbidden area, the game seemed to be caught more easily. Still, those who dared to break the rule and intrude into that area, such hunters, have been vanishing without a trace for generations. However, Takaru was barking fiercely toward that thicket. There was no doubt that the parent and child wild boars were nearby. Lured by temptation, Masao succumbed and stepped foot into the forbidden ground. It was already past 5 in the evening, and while he could still see the surroundings with his naked eyes, the light was dimming, becoming dangerously insufficient for hunting. Takaru had stopped barking earlier. Masao was thinking, maybe it's time to give up. But then, Takaru suddenly began barking furiously again and darted off. Masao followed, running about 50 meters, where he found Takaru. The dog was crouched down, growling and assuming a defensive posture. Thinking, have they finally been found? Masao looked ahead and saw that the place had turned into a slightly open clearing. There, a black figure crouched, making chewing sounds as if devouring something. An intense animal stench hung in the air. Swallowing hard, Masao dropped to one knee on the ground and raised his hunting rifle. It's not a wild boar, Masao concluded. The creature was too slender for a wild boar, and its fur was not as thick. Could it be a wolf? Masao briefly entertained the thought, but he had never heard or seen any wolves in these mountains. Upon closer inspection, he realized that it was feasting on the carcass of the baby wild boar from earlier. Feeling as if his prey had been stolen from him, Masao aimed his rifle at it, intending to shoot. However, his finger on the trigger wouldn't move. In fact, his body seemed frozen in place, as if paralyzed. Only his back teeth were clenching tightly in fear. Then, either sensing Masao's presence or for some other reason, it stopped its meal and slowly turned its face towards Masao. Without a doubt, it was a human face. Moreover, it resembled that of a 2 or 3-year-old baby. It had a body length of about 150 centimeters, a leopard-like build, and thin body hair. To put it plainly, it was a baby's face on a leopard's body, a peculiar appearance. It's a monster. Masao's fear reached its peak. With its mouth covered in the blood of the wild boar, it licked its lips with its tongue and began approaching Masao. I'm going to be killed. Just as Masao had that thought, Takaru leapt at it. Takaru clamped onto its right front leg and shook its head vigorously. It emitted cries resembling those of a human baby while scratching Takaru's nose with its left paw. After being in shock for a moment, Masao realized that he could move his body freely again. He fired a shot immediately. It misfired. How could this be? Masao meticulously maintained his hunting rifle and had checked it right before heading out for the hunt. He pulled the trigger again. Another misfire. While Masao was struggling, it sank its teeth into Takaru's neck. Takaru let out a desperate cry. Masao desperately grabbed the large mountain knife he had on his waist and swung it at its back. It was facing away from him. Ruero. It emitted a cry resembling the yowls of a cat in heat, but it continued to bite down on Takaru's neck. Masao raised the knife again and this time severed its tail. With its tail severed, it screamed, "Ar ar 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 ar." And then, making those strange cries, it disappeared into the thickets deeper within the forest. For a while, Masao stood there dumbfounded. But upon hearing Takaru's labored panting and raspy breaths, he snapped back to reality. Takaru's neck bore bite marks resembling those of human teeth. While there was bleeding, the wounds weren't too deep. Masao applied antiseptic and a cloth to Takaru's neck and administered first aid. Takaru seemed able to walk on his own. Masao couldn't afford to linger, as there was no guarantee that the monster wouldn't attack again. He hurriedly descended the mountain path with Takaru. Eventually, Masao's mountain cabin came into view. It would take about 30 minutes from here to reach Masao's village. Relieved, he quickened his pace even more and hastened towards the village along with Takaru. What's strange, Masao thought, was when he had been descending from the mountain cabin for about 15 minutes. He felt a sensation as if he were going around in circles on the same path. This mountain had been where Masao had played around since childhood, so getting lost was out of the question. Feeling an inexplicable unease, Masao quickened his pace even more. And then, after another 15 minutes had passed. This is ridiculous. In front of him stood the same mountain cabin as before. Masao was bewildered, but he thought, perhaps I got confused due to the extraordinary events and ended up taking the wrong path. So, once again, he started down the same familiar path. However, almost immediately, a sense of despair washed over Masao. No matter what, he was being led back to the mountain cabin. Takaru was panting heavily, blood seeping from the cloth wrapped around his neck. Reluctantly, Masao made the decision to spend the night in the mountain cabin. When Masao entered the cabin, it was already past 8 p.m. Suddenly, a sense of relief, fatigue, and hunger overwhelmed him. He lay down on the floor and stretched out like a starfish, pondering the encounter with the monster just moments ago. Maybe, it was the mountain god after all. As he thought this, his trembling wouldn't stop. Masao began to drink the shochu he had stored in the cabin. There was smoked wild boar meant for preservation too, but it didn't sit well in his throat. Takaru happily devoured what Masao gave him. Can't sleep tonight. With that thought, Masao put his hunting rifle aside and decided to keep watch through the night. Scratch, scratch. A sound as if something were scratching echoed, and Masao woke up. Exhaustion and alcohol had gotten the best of him, and he had seemingly fallen asleep without realizing it. When he checked the clock, it was past 1 a.m. Scratch, scratch. The sound was coming from the roof of the cabin. Takaru seemed awake too, growling softly. Subconsciously, Masao had picked up the hunting rifle. Could it be that it's coming? Though Masao thought this, he didn't have the courage to step outside the cabin and check. Clutching the hunting rifle, he simply stared at the ceiling of the cabin. For about 10 more minutes, the scratching sound against the ceiling persisted, but eventually even that ceased. For Masao, it felt like an eternity of nightmare-like time. Even though the sound had stopped, Masao continued to stare at the ceiling, until suddenly, he heard a voice that sounded like someone murmuring, "Pee-pee, po." Trembling in fear, Masao strained to listen, and then suddenly, Takaru started barking ferociously. Following that, he heard the sound of something running on the roof of the cabin, and a heavy object falling to the ground. Now Takaru was barking persistently towards the entrance of the cabin. Scratch, scratch. Whatever was on the roof seemed to be scratching at the cabin's entrance door. Takaru had his tail tucked between his legs, still barking courageously while retreating. "Who's there?" Masao involuntarily shouted. He aimed the hunting rifle at the door. The scratching sound ceased, and now, from just beyond the door, he distinctly heard the voice of what seemed like a human child. "Tail, tail." It was it. Masao trembled in fear, clenching his teeth that were making a grinding sound. "What do you want?" he shouted. Takaru was still barking. "Tail, tail, please give back my tail." It clearly said this in human language. Unable to bear it any longer, Masao fired a single shot at the door with the shotgun. Kyo! A strange scream was heard from behind the door, and immediately Masao fired 2 more shots, then 3 more shots. Through the holes made in the door by the shotgun, he could see eyes bloodshot and glaring. "Tail, tail, please give back my tail." In the voice of a human infant, it said again. "I don't know about your tail. Go away." Masao tried to pull the trigger in succession, but his body wouldn't move. "Tail, tail, please give back my tail." It repeated those words like a broken tape recorder. I don't know. Go away over there. "Tail, tail, please give back my tail." Once again, it scratched at the door with a grinding sound, and from the hole in the door, it repeated its words, staring at Masao with enraged red eyes. Takaru had stopped barking and was now cowering, tail tucked between his legs. "It wasn't me. I don't know anything about your tail. Go over there," Masao screamed, frozen in place. In response, it shouted, "No, you cut it off," and broke through the door, entering the cabin. Masao's memories were fragmented after that. The face of an infant appearing through the broken door, bloodshot eyes filled with anger, sharp claws on its front paws, the searing pain he felt on his own face, Takaru lunging at it, and himself firing the shotgun in a frenzy. When Masao regained consciousness, he found himself in a hospital bed in the village. He had been in a coma for 3 days. His injuries were severe: a tear-like wound on his left cheek, a broken right leg, and various abrasions all over his body. To the villagers, Masao simply said he was attacked by a bear. However, they seemed to sense that something was amiss, and gradually, Masao began to face exclusion and isolation within the village. Eventually, he moved to Tokyo, got married, and my grandfather was born there. By the way, this story was told by Masao to my grandfather 3 days before he passed away from lung cancer. I'll leave it at that. In terms of location, it happened in a deep forested mountain in Wakayama Prefecture. As for Takaru, the beloved dog, it seems he had died covering Masao's body as if protecting him. His flesh and bones were nearly intact, but strangely, all of his internal organs were completely gone, leaving only a clean void. How was it? Have you ever experienced wanting to do something even though you were told not to? The true reason behind it might hide a horrifying truth. Please, everyone, be cautious and careful. If you have any other stories you would like me to introduce or any questions about the stories, please leave a comment. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thank you, and stay tuned for the next episode.